Later, when the bell rang for lunch, Marcel decided to avoid Arnold entirely. He didn't want to hear him crow about his victory all through break. So instead, he found himself focusing again on Delphine. This time, she stood in the lunchroom, looking uncertainly. None of the girls she had been talking to at recess seemed to have invited her to sit down, so she took a seat at a table by herself. He followed her. "Can I sit here?" he asked. She looked up, her blue eyes interested and curious. "You're the boy with the bike. You almost ran over my cat." "I didn't mean to," said Marcel. "Anyway, you told me the cat was fine." "She is." "I'm Marcel Christophe," he said as he sat down. "Delphine Gillette," she answered, as she reached into a cloth sack and pulled out a sliced baguette layered with cheese. "You're new here." He opened his lunchbox. His meal was very similar to hers. Baguette with ham, a few cornichons, tiny tangy pickles. "We just moved here," she said. "From where?" he asked. "Oh, different places." She seemed reluctant to talk about where she had lived. "Someone said you came from Paris," Marcel ventured. "Well, we did, but that was before." She stopped herself. "I've never been to Paris," said Marcel. "What's it like?" Her blue eyes brightened. "Paris is the most wonderful city in the world," she said. "We have everything. The Louvre, the Jardin de Luxembourg, the metro." Marcel knew she was talking about a famous museum, a public garden, and a subway system, but he'd never seen any of those places except in photographs. "I guess you were sorry to leave," Marcel said as he crunched on a tasty cornichon. It had been hard to get these pickles lately. His mother must have stashed a jar away. Delphine gave him a shrewd look and took a bite of her baguette. "Yes and no. I love Paris. It's my home. But since the Germans came, it didn't feel like it was mine anymore." "I know what you mean," he said. Then he thought that Aucoin couldn't feel much like home to Delphine either. It must have been hard to move away from everything you knew and leave all your friends behind. "Hey, do you want a cornichon?" he offered. She looked hesitant, but finally took one. "Thanks," she said. "I haven't had one of these in a while." The bell rang, signalling the end of lunch. Marcel picked up his lunchbox. "Maybe you can come to my house one day after school," he said. He actually kind of liked her. She seemed so different from the other girls, he knew. "We live above the bakery. My parents own it. I could help you with religion." Her eyes narrowed until he added, "And you could help me with everything else." She laughed. "Maybe I will. You seem pretty good at religion. Or maybe we can ride our bicycles together sometime." "Do you have a bicycle?" asked Marcel. A girl who liked to ride a bike? Now that was really interesting. "It's my brother's. My mother doesn't like me to use it." She made a face. "But he's away at school in London, so what's the harm? Anyway, she doesn't know that, but I even rode it to school today." Flipping her braids over her shoulders, she walked back to the classroom. Marcel followed close behind. When he sat down at his desk, he found a folded note on the seat. He opened it and read it quickly. "Don't forget about the bicycle race today. I hope you don't chicken out because I'm going to win. I beat you at chess and I'll beat you in a race too." Marcel smiled. Arnold liked to boast. Well, let him. Marcel wasn't scared. He couldn't beat Arnold. He would beat him. He could almost hear his classmates cheer as he sailed across the finish line. Arnold may have been the better chess player, but Marcel was pretty sure he was the better cyclist. Thinking about the race made the afternoon drag. They had a science lesson and then music. Usually the music class concluded with the whole class singing Les Marseillais, which was the French national anthem. In the last 2 weeks, though, they had not sung it. Maybe the occupation had something to do with that. But then the dismissal bell rang, and Marcel's focus instantly turned back to the race. He hastily stuffed his books into his satchel, picked up his empty lunchbox, and then went outside with all the other kids. Delphine was nowhere to be seen. But that didn't matter. He went over to his bicycle and quickly pedalled to the appointed place near the church. Arnold was already there, his hands steadying his black bicycle. Gwilym and a bunch of other kids had turned up too, laughing and jostling one another. The afternoon had warmed up even more. Marcel took off his jacket, wadded it up, and stuffed it into his bag. "Are you ready?" called Arnold. "I'm ready," Marcel called back. He handed his bag and lunchbox to Gwilym and manoeuvred his bike into position. Before they could start, Marcel heard his name. He turned, and there was Delphine, riding upon a handsome red bike, ringing its silver bell. That bike was really something, and the bell was great too, shiny, with a forceful sound when she pressed it. Marcel wished he had a bell like that on his bike. "I want to race too," she said. Arnold looked at Marcel. Marcel shrugged. "I don't know," he said. "We've never raced a girl before, have we?" Arnold shook his head. "What difference does my being a girl make?" said Delphine. "I've got a bike. I'm taller than Marcel, but not as tall as Arnold. It seems fair to me." "She's right," said Gwilym, and then several kids chimed in. "Let her race! Let her race!" "OK," Arnold said finally. "Come over here and get in line with us. We'll start at the church, and then we'll keep going until we come to the big oak tree way down the road. Whoever gets there first is the winner." "Sounds good." Delphine positioned herself between Marcel and Arnold and gave her braids what Marcel now realised was her trademark flip. He didn't know how he felt about racing a girl. Delphine had already demonstrated what a good student she was. Now she was trying to prove that she was the best cyclist. Not if Marcel had anything to say about it. He hunkered down over the handlebars. Standing by the finish line, there was a boy named Alain. He was in charge. "On your mark," he called. "Get set. Go!" Marcel took off, speeding down the road like he was being pursued by demons. He kept his gaze steady on the road ahead of him and tried to block out the knowledge that Arnold had pulled ahead and Delphine was gaining on him. Marcel pedalled faster and faster until he caught up to Arnold and passed him. Yes, he was doing it. He was going to beat them. And all of a sudden, Delphine shot ahead like a blazing red rocket, leaving both Marcel and Arnold behind. The crowd of kids chanted her name. "Delphine! Delphine!" Marcel kept pedalling as he lost his focus and his edge. His glasses slipped down the bridge of his nose. Arnold whizzed past him, but Delphine was still ahead of them both. Marcel's eyes clouded with tears as she reached the oak tree and turned round to face the group triumphantly. "The winner!" called out Alain. He pressed down on Delphine's bell a few times, then he yanked her arm up in the air, a gesture of victory. Arnold was there seconds later, and then Marcel in third and last place. Panting with exertion, he angrily swiped at his eyes and pushed his glasses back into the normal place. It took several seconds for his breathing to go back to normal. Delphine had come out of nowhere to win the race. Who even knew a girl could go that fast, riding her brother's bike besides? As Marcel stood watching her, so many things were swirling around inside him. Shame, anger, and disappointment. But also admiration and respect.